Hey, it's Justin Harvey. Thanks for tuning in to the Anesthesia and Pain Management Success podcast. With APM Success, we take a close look at important topics pertaining to business, practice management, personal finance, and careers for anesthesiologists and pain management physicians. We work hard to take your critical questions straight to the experts. Thanks for listening. Greetings, dear listener. This week, I want to talk about extracting value from your clinical practice as a practice owner. This is the partner episode to the one released 2 weeks ago, looking at a physician's balance sheet, what you own, what you owe, understanding the composition of your balance sheet, specifically looking at all your assets and how quickly can I turn those assets into cash. One of the classic dangers that a practice owning physician or any business owner faces is that over time, a meaningful amount of their net worth, if not substantively all of it, is wrapped up in their business. And this can create some real hazard if over time, some of that value is not shoveled from the practice over to the personal side of the balance sheet. Specifically, if you get later on in years and you haven't built up retirement accounts, you don't have taxable investments happening, you don't have a real estate portfolio, all you have is your practice, and you're plowing all your free dollars into that practice, then you're really dependent on an optimal exit from your practice in order to be able to fund your retirement. If you plan a little more proactively, then you can significantly reduce the risk and decrease your dependence on that specific transaction. So today I'm going to talk about a little bit how this can work, what it looks like, how a business owner should be thinking about this. The first is there's no perfect time to begin sort of taking the foot off the gas in terms of your practice growth and taking more cash out of your practice. If you look at, famous entrepreneurs, they basically never did this. If you look at the Elons and the Bezoses of the world, they continued to push all their chips onto the table and try to win. And many entrepreneurs have gone broke this way. A few famous ultra rich ones have, in well-documented fashion, succeeded in continuing to multiply their wealth. There's a more scaled down version of this that physicians go through. It is a big deal when you sort of push all your chips onto the table at the beginning to either buy into a practice or business or surgery center or something, and you're really economically tied in with that. But you have a decision as the velocity of that business picks up, as your revenues grow, as the profitability expands, and as you earn money, you have a decision to either continue to reinvest profits into the practice and grow them quickly, or to take some chips off the table. These famous entrepreneurs, they basically never take chips off the table, or at least they only do it very, very late in the game after an IPO. But it usually makes sense for normal business owners to begin to diversify, to take some of their wins and put them somewhere else. Makes sense for them to do that much earlier on. In the real world, if you're a practice owning physician and you have operational considerations that you're trying to, grow your practice, this might practically look like maybe I want to hire an experienced practice manager who is of a more executive level, like a COO type, who can oversee an expanding footprint, for example. Or maybe I want to buy another practice, or maybe I want to start a new service line, or maybe I'm targeting a meaningful percentage of my revenue or marketing efforts to try to increase the patient throughput. These are ways that a physician may want to reinvest. And in the first, 5 to 7 years of a practice, sometimes, and it varies based on the business, it often makes sense to do that in some measure, to really reinvest, build a good staff, people you can really count on, invest in your infrastructure, make sure that everyone has what they need to do their job, build out your space in a way that allows you to fulfill your vision of what you want for your practice. But at some point, the tables turn, and it makes sense to look in a different direction with what to do with the profits that you're earning. You don't necessarily want to continue to expand your team. You don't necessarily want to continue to open new office sites. I mean, you could do that, but there's a risk if you are just building a more and more valuable entity where you're still dependent on that terminal transaction, that, private equity out, or that sale to a couple junior partners, or whatever the thing is when you're finally going to get paid on that. There's a danger if you're investing all your new money in the business that is just never going to happen. And as a professional risk manager is a really important part of my job description, working with practice owning clients. I want to help them think holistically, what are the goals that you have, physician, and how do you, use the financial resources that you have to accomplish those goals? You probably don't need a, 8-figure exit to be happy and fund your retirement. Maybe you do, depends on, what your lifestyle looks like. But if you don't, often you can meaningfully fund financial independence with the money that you're already making. And so, specifically, here are some ways that a physician who has a practice that is up to speed, that has good revenues, a good team, some profitability, and some extra money left over at the end of the day, these are some ways that a physician can begin to migrate value out of their business and onto a personal balance sheet, which is not going to be subject to any challenges with a later transaction. The first is probably like the simplest, and often this happens very early on, which is put a retirement plan in place for yourself and your people. Most commonly, this would be a 401k. This can usually be done for a few $1,000s, which for a practice with an operating expense of millions in many cases, this is a minor expense in terms of setting it up. Now, the ongoing costs kind of depends on employee participation, depends on the elections that you make in terms of a match or profit sharing. But this is a really good way for you to save, the 415 limit, which means the sum of all different types of contributions you can make into a 401k plan is $69,000 in 2024. So you can't usually do the whole 69, and there's a lot of asterisks and things there. But the point is, it's a pretty good 5-figure number you can do as an employee. 23,000. If you're over age 50, you can do an extra $7,500. And this is a good way that once you start doing this year over year, you're moving some of that value out of your practice. And you're also going to make it easier to have people stick around who want to really build a career with your practice. So often this happens pretty early in the life cycle of a practice. But I run into practice owners who are hiring and usually retaining, seem to be running successful practices who don't have 401ks. I have clients of mine who work for practices like that as well. So if you don't have a 401k and you're a practice owner, you're probably leaving some money on the table, and that's an easy retention tool that you should consider enacting. A second opportunity for migrating value out of your practice, of decoupling your economic well-being from the terminal sale of your practice, would be considering a defined benefit plan. So a 401k is a defined contribution plan, meaning you're limited with how much money you can put in based on the contribution amount, the annual contribution amount that you can fund your account with. A defined benefit plan is sort of the inverse of this. Instead of a max funding amount per year, what you're actually facing is a benefit amount that you are promising on an annual basis to all plan participants. So there is a funding amount, but it takes actuaries and a lot of data to be able to calculate. Interesting thing about the defined benefit plan, and in this context, I'm usually talking about a cash balance pension plan. This is the most common and accessible and affordable type of pension that a physician, even a small physician group, would be able to set up, usually for a handful of thousands of dollars. You can get this rolling. And the thing that makes it compelling in some cases is the contribution limits can be very, very high. They're based on your age. So if you're getting along in years, if you're into your latter 50s or 60s, and especially if you're behind on your retirement savings, this is an opportunity to move significant amounts, 6 figures in many cases, out of your practice from your practice checking account, take a deduction in your business and move it into this cash balance pension plan. Now, you are going to have to make contributions to your other employees as well. So the employer census is an important variable to determine how valuable is the idea of a cash balance pension plan to my practice. If you have a bunch of other older employees, one of the facets which determines the required contribution amount from the employer into the other employee accounts is age and tenure, as well as the income that they make. So if you're, for example, to take a simple example, you're an older physician, you make a lot of money, all your staff are younger, they make much less money. That is an ideal situation where you're going to be able to fund a cash balance pension plan and have the lion's share of that contribution be accreting to the owner. If you have other older staff or there's a couple other partner physicians, it does get a little bit trickier. And it is going to be important to work with a good advisor and a retirement plan team really to run the numbers and make sure that a cash balance plan makes sense. But if you get to this place where you're someone for whom it is a fit, you haven't saved a bunch for retirement, and you have enough cash to be able to start funding. And here's the catch. You need to commit to funding for a period of time, usually generally accepted to be a handful of years. At which time, after that, the account can be rolled out into an IRA or something, and it becomes just retirement funds but you got to be able to sort of have the cash flow and the stability to be able to fund a big chunk of money each year. But if you can do that, then for a physician getting on in years and approaching retirement, this can be a really, really nice tool. So that's the second thing. Defined benefit plan, specifically considering the cash balance pension plan. And I recently did a conversation with Dr. Jimmy Turner, my friend over at Money Meets Medicine. If anybody hasn't heard that podcast, you can check it out, moneymeetsmedicine.com. We talked about in a little bit more detail about a cash balance plan and how that works and for whom it may be a fit. So if that's something you're considering in your practice, you can check out that episode. I'll try to link to that in the show notes. And then finally, this is an obvious one, but perhaps not that obvious, because I do see physicians who kind of overlook this and who continue to do the sort of the Elon Musk thing of pushing all the money back into the business. What you should consider doing as a physician is pay yourself more, increase your salary, profits distributions, take home more money. And when you do it, do something intentional with it. The first and most obvious thing you can do is take advantage of the individual accounts to which you can contribute. So if you have an individual taxable account, either titled in your individual name or in the name of a living trust, or doing your backdoor Roth contributions for yourself and for a spouse if you're married, the taxable account is uncapped. So you can do $1 million a year into a taxable account. If you don't have a taxable investment account, you haven't started funding it yet, especially as you're making a lot of money and building a lot of value in your practice, it's pretty important to begin to migrate some of that money elsewhere. And a taxable account is a great place to do that for a number of reasons. Number one, if managed tax efficiently, it can be hugely advantageous for a high income earner, especially one who expects a capital gain coming. Because if you sink $1 million into your practice to get it started and it's worth $10 million and you sell it one day, that's a $9 million capital gain. And obviously this is a gross oversimplification, but if there is a big capital gain, you're going to pay taxes on that. If you have a taxable investment account and you are managing it tax efficiently, building a capital loss carry forward ongoing, maybe using a separately managed account strategy where you're direct indexing, buying a bunch of individual securities and selling the losers and letting the winners run or giving them away to charity. This can be a nice way to turbocharge your sort of tax efficiency as an owner, as a business owner, and one who hopes to realize a significant capital gain. This only works if you fund that taxable account, which only can be done if you pay yourself enough to take the money out of the practice and put it in that taxable account. This is an important part of what we do for clients, is this tranche in particular, this taxable investment account management in a tax efficient way. Backdoor Roths, obviously that's self-explanatory. You can do the annual max each year. Right now it's $7,000. So $7,000 for you, $7,000 for your spouse. It's an extra $1,000 for each of you if you're over age 50. Should be doing that most of the time unless you have a traditional IRA balance already. Also in play is, paying yourself more to build a real estate portfolio. I encourage people to stay away from the illiquid stuff. And the reason I like the taxable investments sort of first, and even like high yield savings or T-bills accounts for like short to intermediate term purchases, is because they're liquid. And part of what we're trying to do here is in migrating cash out of your business, we want it to be available to you, because if all of your net worth is tied up in something that's very hard to sell, if and when a cash crunch happens, either for you personally or because you're getting ready to sell and because of the market dynamics, it's hard to get what you deem to be a fair price. You think it's worth $8 million, but you can only secure an offer worth $3 million, and that isn't going to be good enough for you. Then it really is helpful to have access to assets you can, get your hands on in the meantime without significant adverse tax impact. And so, taxable account, even Roth IRAs, they're the best assets to bequeath, and you shouldn't really. I don't like to draw down Roth IRAs if we can avoid it, but you can access that without any tax penalty generally if you do it smart and if you're accessing it later on in life. So yeah, you can invest in real estate. Maybe this means buying a medical office building and running your practice out of it. Maybe it means residential rental real estate, or I don't really like the syndications. It's probably not a surprise. A lot of that is played out at this point, and it's physicians are targeted because they're known to be not very good with investment due diligence, and they're known to make money and be unsophisticated. And so they're taken advantage of. And sometimes, and I am aware of some out there that I like, but those are the exception, not the rule. So I'm not talking about syndications in this case, but obviously talk to your advisor and make sure that it's whatever you're pursuing here is in accordance with your written financial plan. And just a final word of caution, like with all of the increasing my own pay to invest in some other thing, with all of those other things that we're thinking about, keep an eye towards liquidity. And how long is it going to take me to turn this thing into cash? And what is the potential penalty of turning it into cash if I have to do it on a short-term basis? Liquid investment accounts should be the first go-to. And until you've got a really nice sum saved up in those types of accounts, it often makes sense to do that first, just because of the flexibility and the freedom that it gives you. And then you can do whatever you want. And then if you want to do all real estate syndications or all valuable artwork or like a stamp collection or some other highly illiquid thing, fine. If you've got the taxable accounts to be able to fund a handful of years of living expenses, then you have the flexibility to do those other illiquid things without significant adverse impact and with a wide margin of safety. And at the end of the day, the margin of safety is a really important thing and something that we manage toward. I call it the stress-adjusted return on investment. If you have a wide margin of safety in accounts you can access, knowing that you have months or years of runway, then you just don't have to stress nearly as much as if you're running on a razor's edge because you're pushing all your cash back into your practice to try to, maximize the value. Now, there's something to be said, and I actually have an important conversation coming up in a couple of weeks with some experts in the physician succession planning space. And I'm excited to bring those conversations here to this audience, where we're going to talk about how do you make your practice attractive for sale? What kinds of things do you need to do? But before that happens, as you're thinking about the financial planning component of being a business owner, it's obviously a first step to just decrease your dependence on that transaction. So I know I'm now repeating myself. Thanks for listening. Got some exciting things coming down the pike. I had that live interview last week with Dr. Buchanan from Aspen. That was a ton of fun. A couple other Aspen connections are going to be interviewed in the coming weeks. And I welcome any listener questions. So if you're listening to this and you're like, Justin, I really wish you would just talk about fill in the blank, something you're going through or specific job opportunity or whatever, drop me a line, justin@apmsuccess.com. Would love to field those questions and put it in the pipeline for a future episode. As always, thanks for tuning in. Talk to you next week. If you liked what you heard this week, head on over to apmsuccess.com, where you can find more content and free resources to help you build a successful career in anesthesia and pain management. If you wanted to leave a review in iTunes, I'd also really appreciate it. Thanks for using some of your valuable time to join me today on APM Success.